Hello and welcome to Hawks Podcast. I'm Tyler and I'm a Vikings fan. And with me, I have Matt and he is a Seahawks fan. We're just two dudes in North Carolina who happen to go to college together, love talking ourselves some NFL football. And as we started talking about our teams who faced each other every year, it seemed like we started getting into the league itself and we were like, you know what? This could be a thing. We could make a podcast out of it. So over the years, we talked about it and we were like, the only way to find out if it'll be successful is to hit the ground running. So let's just make it. We have no podcast experience. So if this is a complete and total train wreck, we apologize in advance. But we figured with the Vikings and the Seahawks, there's nothing that can go wrong. It's not like we're going to be talking about a bunch of missed field goals or throwing interceptions at the one.
Are you sure about that?
So, actually getting into it, so Tyler, what is your expectations for the Vikings this year?
Well, I'd like to say that they're good. And I think that will be determined based on the fact if we have any injuries. Because other than tight end and wide receiver and perhaps safety, we have like no depth whatsoever based on what I've seen in this preseason game. We've got receivers for days, but it doesn't matter if our quarterback has no time to throw the ball or if our quarterback misses the receiver. So basically, all our guys better stay healthy. And let's say that most of them, for the majority, stay healthy, or we make a signing midseason that fixes whoever gets hurt. Let's assume that's the case. My expectation is about a 10-win season. I'd say that's probably where we're looking at, probably wild card team, or if we're able to beat the Lions in our key matchups at the end of the season, week 16 and 18, I think we could pull out the North because the Lions might lose a few games at the beginning due to those suspensions. So that's honestly what I'm praying for. But as of right now, I'm looking at rookies like Jordan Addison. Can he step in for Adam Thielen? That was my favorite NFL player, so I'm sad to see him go to the Panthers. But I mean, he was getting older up in age, so I mean, it's probably good to get a young guy in there. And Jordan Addison has some speed. He's had some flashes. So I'm just hoping that he can come in and contribute. And I think that we obviously have a high octane offense. We just have to hope our defense can at least be opportunistic because we have maybe two veterans that are starting. So that's not exactly what you want. So yeah, that's about my prediction for my Vikings. I think that Ivan Pace Jr. though, that's about if I had to pick one player I'm excited to see that we just got besides Jordan Addison, Ivan Pace Jr., that linebacker UDFA out of Cincinnati. He is looking like a stud. He's been wearing the green dot both preseason games. He's been all over the field, putting pressure on the quarterback, making some good pass breakups, making some great tackles out in the field. So I want to see him develop, and I think he's part of the future. I still can't believe he went undrafted. What about you and your Seahawks, man? How you feeling?
Okay, so my turn. So with the Seahawks, if you were to ask me last year that going into this year that they would be a dark horse team, I'd have said you were crazy, insane, out of your mind, just go to a psychiatric ward. But with Geno Smith having a breakout year last year, I'm hoping he can continue it instead of it just being a one-off. Hopefully he doesn't decline. Seahawks are probably more of a dark horse team in the NFC rather than like full contenders. I still say the 49ers probably have a more well-around cast, even with all the QB questions. The Rams, we don't really know who they are right now. And then the Cardinals, they're probably going to be one of the worst teams in the league. I think we can both agree on that. We brought in a very talented rookie class, but the main thing about this class is can they stay healthy? We've already seen three of the top few picks already be injured throughout the preseason. And coming into the draft, one of their main problems was injuries. Devin Witherspoon and the wide receiver from Ohio State both had injury issues. And preseason, here we go again. JSK just had wrist surgery today. We'll see how long he's out. Pete Carroll's saying around 3 to 4 weeks. So hopefully he can be back in enough time. But luckily, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett should be able to hold it down until then. Um, Final record, I'm thinking maybe like 10, 11 wins is probably near their ceiling. Probably a bit more realistic is probably 8 to 10, just depending on how the season goes. And like if Jamal Adams can stay healthy, I think we can probably hit that ceiling. If he cannot stay healthy like the past few years, if everybody else that has injury questions has injuries, we could probably be going lower to around 7. So it really depends on just the health of guys. And if we can be really healthy, I could see us actually contending with the 49ers, especially with their QB questions. The NFC is basically a wide open book right now. So anybody can really win it. So I feel like the Seahawks are kind of that team where if they go in the right direction instead of backwards, I feel like they could be a really good team this year. But going on to preseason reactions, how do you feel about your Vikings so far in the preseason?
Well, I mean, it's hard to feel good when you're 0-2, but as is most things with the preseason, you have to take things with a grain of salt. We haven't played any of our starters. There's been no talk that I know of that says we are going to play our starters. So I'm hoping that that's the case because I'd rather not risk our injury, especially with Jordan Addison not playing that second preseason game anyway off of a concussion. I feel like risking him playing it all in the third preseason game would be a waste, and just would be extremely risky. So I'd rather just not see our starters play. Maybe the starting offensive line to give our quarterbacks a chance, and our other receivers a chance to show what they can do with enough protection. But I mean, I'd only want to see that for a couple of drives just to not risk anything. Because again, when you were saying your Seahawks predictions, I was like, you guys have. I saw firsthand week one. You guys have a lot of depth at very key positions. So if you guys do have injuries, it's not like you guys are going to be completely deflated. Whereas if we get a key injury, like I said, we are looking real bad, or we have to go sign somebody ASAP. So I think that the Vikings definitely, while our preseason doesn't show it, none of our starters have played. And we haven't had major injuries, knock on wood, of course. So I'm just, hoping that continues. And again, like I said, maybe the starting offensive line, see it week 3, but other than that, keep the starters off the field, other than the defense, of course. But like I said, there's only 2 veterans on that team. So, but yeah, I think that, I'm just looking to see some more plays being made, some more protection stand up, some more pressure on the quarterback, just some things that I really haven't seen too much of throughout these first 2 preseason games. So hoping to win a little bit more at the line of scrimmage. I still want the Vikings to sign Dalton Risner, but I don't think that's going to happen, at least not now. So just hoping to see more than I saw. Definitely at this point, anything can be better than the Titans game. That was the most boring preseason game I've ever seen. So, with that, I'll turn it over to you and your Seahawks. How you feeling about the preseason?
So, like you said perfectly, preseason is always a grain of salt. We've seen teams that have sucked in the preseason and then win the Super Bowl, or we've seen teams go undefeated in the preseason and then suck the rest of the year. It really just depends on how the backups play against other backups. But there's a lot of guys competing for spots on the roster. I believe the last time I heard we were still around 90 people on the roster spot. So there's a lot of people that are fighting for jobs right now. But if I'm really going to key into one person that I'm excited to see having performed really well this preseason is Drew Lock actually performing really well. For a starting quarterback, he's probably not even mid to low tier. He's probably at the bottom of the barrel, especially with seeing what he did in Denver. But as a backup QB, I feel like he could really be a consistent guy where at the end of games, if we just need somebody to go out there, it's a blowout, just finish the game for us, or if Geno ever goes down, I feel really good that we have a guy who can at least get in there and make the plays that need to happen to either get us to the end, give us a lead, or even if it's a close game, maybe get us the win. So I'm really excited to see stuff like that. Been seeing a lot of improvement and a lot of rookies that were later drafted in the drafts playing out of their minds at some points in the games. There's a lot of guys that are making some mistakes, but a you can't complain with a 2-0 start in the preseason. We'll see how they do this weekend, but right now I feel pretty good where we're at. It's just going to be, can we get healthy by the regular season, which that's starting to come into question with the recent injuries recently.
Of course. And actually, I did want to touch on one more thing before we move on to topics. Speaking of breakout players, I know I touched on a rookie coming in, but I did want to touch on a veteran real quick. Obviously, getting Brian Flores to be our defensive coordinator is probably the most flashy and probably will be the most impactful signing for the Vikings this upcoming year. But I think a sneaky pick that's going under the radar is Josh Oliver from the Ravens. He's the best blocking tight end in the National Football League. I think that's according to PFF. I could be wrong there, but it's a big bodied guy. He's a mountain of a man. And I think that pairing him with TJ Hawkinson, putting CJ Ham in the backfield, we could be seeing a lot of 22 personnel with the Vikings this year to be able to get those 1 yard gains on 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1, what in any of those situations where we really failed last year. And so I'm really excited to see what he's going to bring, not only in blocking, but also in the passing game. I think he's going to be the definite check down option for Kirk Cousins this year.
Okay, so moving on to our topics of other preseason things that are going on. First of all, with the most recent news with Jonathan Taylor being given the request to actually seek out trades from other teams. What do you think about it? And is there any teams that you think that he would be a good fit for, or even if it's not the greatest fit, should still go for him?
I mean, I think it's great for Jonathan Taylor because obviously the stuff with Jim Irsay and everything coming out, it really was just a bad situation. Everybody knew he wasn't happy. He wanted to trade. He wants out of there. And so I'm happy that he at least has the opportunity to search for it. However, with the current situation with the NFL, I don't know if he's going to be able to find compensation that he feels equates to his level of production. And I think that that's just something that the NFL needs to figure out because, while it is true that running back talent seems to grow on trees, that a lot of guys can go out there, can get you the yards you need on a run, on a rush, or can catch it out of the backfield, can block that extra guy that gets through the offensive line. Again, the bare minimum for most running backs. There are the Derrick Henrys, the Jonathan Taylors 2 years ago, the Nick Chubbs, all those guys out there who literally can make or break a game. I mean, looking at Dalvin Cook for us, I can think of several games in which he's brought us back into games or has won us the game, or even just literally we rode on his back to a win. I'm talking Packers like 1 or 2 years ago. We went into Lambeau and he just rushed for like 280 and 4 touchdowns or something like that. And so those guys, I believe they need fair compensation, but I don't think that gets there without the league doing something. And I think I can speak for both of us that we believe the running backs, especially those who are, the Derrick Henrys and Nick Chubbs of the world, should be paid for their
Yeah.
compensation. And I think that what does that come with cap space? Like, does the NFL make a new amendment to their rules and say we're going to bump the cap space up so you guys can pay your running backs? Does that come with people just changing their mindsets? I don't know how that gets done, but I think something has to get done for that compensation. Jonathan Taylor might be looking at a 1 year deal for maybe $7 million, or maybe he's able to get lucky and find something like Saquon did 1 year for 10 or 11 with some compensation maybe added in. But I don't see him getting anything more than that. And again, I don't see a lot of teams that would be willing to pay that. I mean, obviously, he's looking into Miami, right? Is that one of the
I know they are
teams he's
one of
looking into?
those. They're one of the
Yeah.
reported teams looking into him.
And I mean, Miami was in on Dalvin Cook, but nothing ever happened there. So that makes me think that Miami isn't willing to spend the money on anybody like that. So I mean, if they were in on Dalvin Cook, they had a visit with him, and that's a hometown guy too. He wanted to go there, then it might be a monetary thing. So I mean, I can't really think of any teams that you know are going to want to shell out as much money as Jonathan Taylor wants. So I think it's going to come down to, is he willing to play for 1 year on a slightly, low level deal? What are your thoughts?
I think it all comes down to cap space. So I know the reported um, compensation the Colts are looking for, not including salary wise to match salaries, but was specifically like a first round pick or
The
a
equivalent, yeah.
or a collection of picks that are equal to a first round pick. So I think it could be for Jonathan Taylor's advantage to not try to go find a team that's going to give him an extended contract. We saw what happened with Le'Veon Bell with the Jets. Um, I think he should probably try to find a good team that he can show that he still has it. I know last year was kind of a down year for him. I think there was injuries that played a part of that as well. But
Yeah,
I
he
think,
was injured.
yeah.
Exactly.
Um,
Hmm.
so I think he just needs a year where he can say, I can still do this. I think like a major problem that has come into this is over the past few years, you've had a Le'Veon Bell, you've had Todd Gurley, and you've had like Ezekiel Elliott, where they get these huge contracts, and just the shelf life of a running back, the amount of punishment you're putting on your body, it's just a lot. And it's not the same rules that protect quarterbacks and wide receivers. Running backs are getting hit every single play, whether you're blocking, catching, running, whatever, you're getting hit every single play that you're involved with. And I think it just gets into like you see like Mike Shanahan and the 49ers now where it's running back by committee until they got Christian McCaffrey. But still, they're going through running backs. One part of it is the 49ers have a curse with injuries with the running backs, but that's a whole nother thing. But I think everyone sees I can get the same amount of basically output for having 3 to 4 guys that I'm paying less. They're getting less carries, but I'm still getting the same output without one having to pay all of them the same much as a prime running back, and two, I'm putting less wear and tear on their bodies. Where like a Derrick Henry, he's what 80 to 90% of taking all the carries for the Titans. So it gets into one of these things where I think the league is just moving to a point it's running back by committee where you see with like other colleges when the NCAA where you don't have one prime guy. It's 3 to 4 guys that you may have like a power back. You might have a running back that's exclusively for catching on third down, one that might be more for blocking. So I think the league
Definitely
is
agree.
going in
Yeah.
that direction, but it's just all going to depend on what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely you made some great points there, especially that last one about the, different backs for different downs. I mean, the Vikings even have that now. I mean, we just showed that we don't value Dalvin Cook enough to keep him for how much money he was going to be worth this year, or how much was left on his contract. Forget how much it was, but it was double digit at least. And so, I mean, now we have Madison, we have Ty Chandler from last year, and we brought in Dwayne McBride, Abram Smith, and uh, some other guy. I can't remember his name, but I mean, essentially, we have different guys that look like they can be for different downs and distances and for different situations. And I think that that really is what the league's moving towards. But I mean, you can't deny, like, if you have a Derrick Henry who can just beat you to pieces, like he, like I said, he is, one in a million. I think there's not a bunch of guys like Derrick Henry. So I think he's a guy that would actually be deserving of that long-term contract. However, like you also said, the shelf life of a running back getting hit every single play, you know, being at high risk with how fast they're running and having to make all those cuts. There's a lot of non-contact injuries that could be involved with running backs with the change of direction. And I think that that's still, coaches are realizing it, and that's why they have so many guys. So I think that, this situation's gonna be here for a while, and I think that's why we see Josh Jacobs still not coming to practice. So
And getting back to the original like question of where do I think Jonathan Taylor's going to go? Um, honestly, I know this is just going to be like, oh, just jump on the Chiefs bandwagon, but like somewhere like the Chiefs or shoot, even Miami, I think those are good places for him to go to. One, while he might not get the contract he's wanting to, I think the bridge with the Colts has been burned so much. I think that's just a environment. It's just not going to work. So, yeah, those if you get a first round pick from the Chiefs, it's probably going to be somewhere between 20 to 30, if not 32. Because I feel like if Jonathan Taylor goes on to the Chiefs, that might be it for the rest of the league. I don't see any issues with that offense, except maybe a bit with depth with wide receivers, but that's pretty much it for that offense.
Right. I think that's definitely a great take. I think mine's going to be a little bit more of a hot take, so to speak. I don't think he's going to be traded or let go from the Colts until mid-season, sometime around there when the Ravens have an injury. And I hate to talk bad about the Ravens, but we've seen how they've been the past couple of years at the
Yeah.
running back positions, and even just this preseason, um, or just training camp. I think they've already had one major injury at running back, and they've had to sign another guy. Um, and I think that, or they're still waiting on some guys to come back. So I think if they see, their main guys go down again, because the Ravens love to run the ball, and that's another thing. Some teams don't have to do running back by committee because they do an even mix of passing and running, or they're like the Chiefs and they just air it out all over the yard and they don't run unless they need to. But the Ravens, they thrive on it. So I think if they start losing their guys and they get banged up through all the games, they might say, all right, you know what, at this point we're still trying to compete for the AFC North. Let's go get Jonathan Taylor. And I think that's where he might see a trade.
That's a good point with the Ravens. I feel like we can agree that their whole roster is probably just cursed with running back injuries. Um,
Exactly.
or even the whole roster is just cursed with injuries. But um, my only counterpoint is I believe they have like I know they're probably not going to be able to keep them all when they go down to a 53-man roster. So this is going to be a mute point in probably 2 weeks. But I think they have around like 5 running backs on their roster right now. Now, if they cut it down to 2 or 3, I know Melvin Gordon's on that roster, and we know his fumbling issues with last year with Denver. Denver was also just a bad team, so that might have been part of it, but I feel like it could get to a point where the Ravens might be looking for somebody. I just don't see the Colts just holding on to Jonathan Taylor for that long. Now, it could be they're just not a market yet. Because from what I've heard, it's only sounded like Miami's the only team that's like been actually in the running. There might be a bit more in the background that we just haven't heard yet, which that could totally be true. But I think it's also one of those things where, yeah, the Christian McCaffrey experiment worked out pretty well for the 49ers, but I feel like it's hard bringing in any type of player, especially a running back, into a system and trying to get him ramped up to start the season in less than 2 weeks when you've already had a whole training camp and everything for the guys you have set on your roster and that you're already planning to have. So, unless somebody really needs a running back and doesn't have like a running back by committee, honestly, if the Jets did not get Dalvin Cook, I would probably say the Jets might be a great place for Jonathan Taylor. But now with Dalvin Cook, I feel like that scratches them off the list. So it's just going to really depend on who wants him, actually, which I know that's a mute point, but it's just going to really
Right.
depend.
Right, and I don't remember what the Ravens' first few games look like, but I mean, like I was saying, if they're still in contention by the time, maybe they don't even have injuries yet, but they're thinking, what if we get some guy like Jonathan Taylor to put in the backfield with Lamar? So they have to respect the box so much and stack it. So and then we'll have OBJ, the new draft pick they just got Zay Flowers, right? That was the
Yeah,
Ravens pick.
yeah,
I think, yeah. They've got their guys on the outside. Let's allow them to maybe get some one-on-one looks. I think that might be something Harbaugh considers down the road, whether injuries are there or not. But I think, especially if injuries are there, I think he might look into that and go, you know what? We have a shot at winning the North. And we don't know when Joe Burrow is coming back. He's looking good at practice, but are they going to want to trot him out there, on week one, if he's still, trying to work back through, all the physical therapy and stuff? And if they do that, does he get hurt? I mean, if the Bengals lose Joe Burrow, that division
yeah.
becomes pretty much open between them and the Browns. I mean, the Steelers. are looking good too. So I mean, they got to stay in contention. So uh, that's one thing I would think about if I'm Harbaugh. I'm like, man, I would have to make defenses stack the box. Absolutely.
And you make a good point with the Bengals, especially with Joe Burrow, because I know it was a different injury. I think it was actually like major surgery that he had to have before the season started last year. But we saw how he came into that Steelers game that first week with, I believe it was what, 5 interceptions.
Mm.
I know he's saying, oh, he only needs like one practice rep and then he'll be good to go. I feel like if you try to rush Joe Burrow back, if he gets injured again, you might as just well watch the whole season for the Bengals. I don't see them being competitive at all without Joe Burrow.
I mean, Jamar Chase even came out and said in an interview that, if he were to decide on Joe Burrow coming out week 1 or not, he would err on the side of him not coming out unless he's exactly 100% ready. And I mean, that's his teammate from college. So if
Yeah.
he's saying that, then he knows how important Joe Burrow is to that organization and to that team, to that offense. So
And I think we've also seen that I think that organization has themselves have seen what you are with Joe Burrow and what you are without Joe Burrow, especially that first year when he had like that major injury where before they were at least in contention in games, after that it just came tumbling down. I know it's hard to really say how much a quarterback is worth to a team. I know quarterback wins is a huge argument. Not going to have that tonight, but especially a quarterback of his caliber, if you lose Joe Burrow, you might as well just, as I said before, just wash the whole division. And I feel like if you are the Ravens, this is the time that you probably need to strike now, get ahead early. So when he comes back, you at least have like maybe a 2 or 3 game lead, especially depending on how long Joe Burrow's out. So
exactly, strike while the iron's hot, so to
yep.
speak. Go get yourself a Jonathan Taylor and go take the division possibly. I mean, again, you hate to look at it that way by injuries, but I mean, at this point with running backs and with how teams are, I think the only way that Jonathan Taylor sees what he wants and the Colts see the compensation that they want
Yeah.
is if a team does have injuries or they can go or they think they can make that last hurdle with a Jonathan Taylor in the backfield.
I think a part of the problem is, especially with it now being like a first round pick compensation, this last draft kind of throws this whole topic or my whole argument out the window. But especially like early first round picks, you never see them usually go to a running back unless they are like top of the class. You think they're going to be like the next Derrick Henry or even greater. So, especially these teams that are like probably going to suck again, they are looking at probably Jonathan Taylor and are like, I'm not giving up a first round pick where that pick might be top 10 and I don't know what I'm getting for Jonathan Taylor. Or one, how long am I going to have him? 2, am I going to be able to pay him? And could I put that pick into a better investment that's going to last me longer? Like, say, I don't know, whoever drafts Caleb Williams, would you rather have Jonathan Taylor or Caleb Williams? I would probably say Caleb Williams, but
Exactly. And I definitely, while watching that draft, I was not expecting any running backs to be taken in the first round. And I was very pleasantly surprised as I had to patiently wait for 23 for my Vikings to select. So
thanks Falcons and Lions for that one.
that was amazing. I was jumping for joy at those picks. I mean, granted, they're probably going to rush so much on us this year because we play the Lions twice and we also play the Falcons. So I'm gonna eat those words, but I was jumping for joy after each of those selections because I was just like, they took a running back, not a wide receiver. Thank goodness.
Well, speaking of this draft, so with the new QBs, we've seen them start a few drives in the preseason, and I think we can agree there's been mixed results, and I think we are starting to see that even with these new QBs, it doesn't equate to the teams being good. Now we've seen this in the past where like the Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston experiment in Tennessee and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where just trying to toss them into the system and hoping that they fix everything, it just doesn't work. But I think there was a bit more expectations this year that yeah, the Texans and the Panthers and the Colts. Now the Colts is a bit more of a project guy, but the Texans and Panthers, there should at least be improvement. So far, it's just kind of sucked. So, what's your opinion so far on those guys?
I mean, again, like we said near the beginning of this video, preseasons with a grain of salt. I mean, you're looking at guys, just getting their first taste of the NFL, regardless of whether they're first round draft picks or not. I mean, so I think let's headline with that.
Yeah,
But I think when you look at, some of the QBs around the league, like if you're looking at the Panthers, right?
yeah.
I mean, you have all these headlines coming out about the porous O line. When I look at the Panthers, I feel somehow better about the Vikings O line situation. And that should not ever be a thing said about the Vikings O line. You should never feel good about the Vikings O line situation. Um, and
With
so
that,
I
I
think
felt good about the Seahawks O line comparing it to the Panthers because, man, I feel bad for Bryce Young. It didn't seem, especially that Jets game, it didn't seem like he had more than 5 seconds in that pocket every snap. So,
exactly. And that's when you're kind of thinking to yourself, you can't really say whether he's good or bad yet. And you're still not going to know, and you may not even know after this year if the O line stays as bad, which I mean O linemen don't just develop magically in a week or two, or even in a season for that matter. I don't think you can really tell. It's definitely going to be the term developmental quarterback. Even with being the first quarterback taken, he's going to have to develop. He's going to have to learn how to throw quick balls. I mean, if he can turn into Ben Roethlisberger, getting the ball out, in record time, then
yeah.
we'll see some success this year. But otherwise, they're going to have to wait until that O line gets beefed up, or they're going to have to move tight ends, in motion to get extra blocking. They're going to have to do something in order to they're gonna have to roll them out a lot of the time. Like that's what I'm thinking for the Panthers. I'm liking what I'm seeing from Richardson. Ironically, going back to the Colts, like I like what I see with him. I mean, sure he makes mistakes, but he's got a great arm, and I think that he has a feel for the pocket and has a good sense for the overall game. I'm excited to see him play this year. While the Colts may not be a good team, with that being said, they're probably going to be behind in a lot of games, and Richardson's going to be airing it out. So I'm excited to see what that's going to look like. And the Texans, I mean, they're the Texans. They've been a bad team. They're still a bad team. No offense to Texans fans, and I love Damian Pierce. I had him in fantasy last year. He put in work, and he's just a great guy. And he's an example of a guy who comes out and shows that if you put in the effort, you can do well. But I mean, they're still in the rebuilding stages. That's not a surprise to anybody, and I think that they're definitely going to have to wait to get him all the weapons he needs, and they're going to need to they're going to need to beef up their O line as well. I know they've made a few extensions and a few signings in the recent years, but I mean they've still got a lot of work to do. So overall, I think again you can't really take preseason with too much seriousness, but I think the one you definitely can take is the Panthers,
Yeah.
because if he's struggling with that O line and he's got to go face the beasts that are some defenses around this league, like the Fletcher Coxes in the middle, and um, Nick Bosa. I don't know who all the Panthers play this year, but I mean they've got to face. I would imagine they have to face a lot of good fronts, and so how does Young handle that? Would be my is that's gonna define his season this year.
And I believe we've agreed that the NFC South is probably is going to be one of the worst divisions in football, but especially the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Saints, I still believe they have pretty good, decent defensive lines, and I think the Falcons also have a decent line. So especially with the Panthers' offensive line when they've been sending Bryce Young out there. That's been the number one unit, and you've been struggling against like
Backups.
backups most of the time. Now you might have been facing the starters for like one series, but even then, like the second or third series, they're still struggling, and it's one of the problems with trading DJ Moore. DJ Moore could have covered a lot of holes up with, especially he's a fast guy where you can get that ball out quick, and he's going to be in open field where you can make an easy throw to him. Now you probably needed to get rid of DJ Moore to get that number one pick, and if you really feel like Bryce Young is your guy, it's really hard to argue. No matter, depending on, now you could say you get to the point where it's too stupid compensation, but it's hard to argue with a lot of compensation if you think that is your future guy that you're going to have for a decade, maybe even a decade or a half, or however long you have him. Now, looking at the Texans, yeah, they're still probably going to suck this year. I feel like the Cardinals are going to have maybe the first and second pick of next year's draft, which great for the Cardinals. But with the Texans, I feel like they have two really good key pieces on offense and defense to start building the future with. Now, missing that first round pick next year is still going to hurt, but if you feel like Will Anderson's really that piece to move that defense forward, I can't really argue with that. We'll just have to see how he does this year. So
Exactly. I mean, back in the day, they were a bad team before. Then they go get a guy like JJ Watt,
yeah,
and then they build up and they start going to playoffs. So I mean, all it could take is one guy in some team situations. Um, and to your point about the offensive line playing against different levels, we saw that firsthand in our preseason game, week 1. You guys played your second strings, I believe, for 3 quarters. When in the second half we switched our second string out for our third string, Jaron Hall coming in. I'm excited to get a look at our rookie QB that we just drafted in, I believe, the 5th round. And I didn't realize that you guys kept your second string out, because I'm not looking into the Seahawks depth chart to see who your second and third string guys are. But when he comes in, back-to-back sacks. And throughout the entirety of the game, not just in the third quarter with your second string on the field, but even when your third string was on the field in the fourth quarter, he was under constant duress and he didn't have his best game because he looked so uncomfortable, because he knew he didn't have any time to throw the ball. So, I mean, definitely if the Panthers are in the opposite situation where their first string guys are struggling against second string guys, that's what makes me feel good about. That's what I was saying earlier. Like that makes me feel better about our line, because at least that was our third string struggling against your second string, and our third string struggling against your third string, not the not the other way around. So that's definitely a important piece of it. And I think that, teams are starting to realize, the Eagles and the 49ers, the reason why they're so successful is because they win in the trenches.
yeah.
And I think we're going to see at least one of those teams in every NFC championship game for a few years to come, unless they suffer injuries.
And before we move on to the next topic, I feel like one last thing with O-lines, I feel like especially when you look at the, like, not just good but great O-lines, it's a unit. Now, you'll always have injuries, especially with O-linemen, because they're in the trenches every single down. A lot of the time, yeah, you can take defensive linemen out of the game to give them a rest. O-line, if you do that, your quarterback's getting sacked, getting strip sacked. Your running back's going to be back in the backfield -5 yards. So it's really hard to move out offensive linemen, especially when you're trying to create that unit. You have to have consistency. So a lot of these teams that are trying to piece together linemen, the Seahawks try to do it for half a decade, where you have to have that consistency to start building up. A reason why I feel like the Seahawks O-line is going to be better this year is they're starting to actually create that consistency instead of trying to piece together a new O-line every single season. I just don't think it works. So maybe as we go on throughout the year, if that O-line for the Panthers can get consistency and become a unit, they might be able to become better. We'll just have to see, and it also depends on if they can stay healthy. So we'll have to see.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up too, because last year everybody was wondering we smoked Packers week 1, and then we go up there late in the season and get smacked by them, and everybody's wondering what the heck happened. And of course, J.R. Alexander's popping off saying, "Oh, I locked him up," all this type of stuff like that. When in reality, JJ was actually being double or triple teamed every play. But that's besides the point. One of the main reasons why we got shellacked by the Packers, in that late season game is because our center got hurt early in the game, and everybody was confused on to when the ball was supposed to be snapped, and our backup center was getting bull rushed into Kirk Cousins pretty much every play, and he had no time to throw the ball, just like you were saying, just like we were saying with Young. He's got virtually no time. I mean, how's a team supposed to win if the quarterback can't throw the ball? I mean, that's a big problem. So just wanted to throw that out there. So still a little bit salty with seeing some of the comments from that game. So
Okay. So moving on to playing different levels of the depth chart. So last season, especially in the recent history coming up to last season, there's been a lot of arguments about you shouldn't play your starters in the preseason. All you're doing is going to get them hurt. Just play them in the regular season, especially with the additional game. Now you've had the preseason game being the fourth preseason game being scratched. But last year, a lot of teams decided we're not playing our starters. You get to the season, they're all rusty. It's taken 2 to 3 games just to get the starters going. This preseason, we've seen a lot more starters playing, even if it's 1 to 2 drives. And I feel like we saw last year, the teams that did play their starters in the preseason came out a lot more ready to go once the season started than those who didn't. So just wanted to hear your thoughts on it.
well, I mean, obviously, it's each head coach's decision, and my thoughts kind of vary on that. I mean, I personally, with, of course, like I said with my Vikings, if we have any injuries, we're screwed. Basically, any significant injuries. So I obviously, for my team, I would hope that we don't play the starters, except for maybe the starting offensive line, like I said, for a few drives, and that's it. But for some teams, I think it's necessary. Like the Panthers need to play the third preseason game with their starters because they've already been struggling. They need to find out how to make it right. And I think that in that third preseason game, you might see them moving tight ends, over to the other sides and everything, putting them in motion to try and get extra blocking around, rotating offensive linemen, whatever it may be. I think that may be something that they try out and they want to try and get everything to make sure what they're going to do works. But I think that teams who pretty much know their identity, like the Chiefs, the Eagles, even our two teams, I think we know who our starters are. I think we know what our objectives are on offense and defense. I think we really don't need to see much out of our starters. I think it'd be bad. I mean, bad might not be the right word, but I think it'd be pointless maybe to put them out there and risk them getting injured when that's our season. And I mean, like you said, it's a longer season now. I know we only added one more game, but that one game is really, really tough, especially when you add in the fact that we have an extra playoff team and only one team gets a bye week
Yeah.
in the playoffs. So I mean, it becomes a much longer season now,
That's
and I
60
think
more minutes of contact.
exactly, and you know, and if you make the playoffs, it's 120 more if you're not the number one seed. So I mean, getting the 2 seeds is almost an insult now because you
Yeah.
don't even get the bye week to go with it.
The
But I
only
mean,
thing
I
you
think
get is the reassurance that every, what is it, eighth seed now or whatever, that has gotten in basically sucks because they're basically dragging themselves in the playoffs, and I feel like we've seen every final wild card team just get blown out. So that's really the only good thing about it. You're playing the worst wild card, but we might see one season where somebody gets hurt, and then that's it
right.
for that second seed.
Yeah, and you get that, and obviously, I mean, you do get the second home game if you win, which I think they have been doing the whole time. The second seed wins, I think, all the matches, if I'm not mistaken. So, against the seven, ever since the 7th seed was created. But speaking of that props to you guys for at least making that game interesting.
Yeah.
Against the 49ers last year. Like that was the first time I watched a second seed versus a 7 seed, and I was like, this is a good game. Then the second half happened.
Yeah.
Anyway,
We shouldn't have been there anyway, so just getting it to a half, that was all I needed to see. Was we got it to a half. I felt good about the team. We were still getting 2 decent picks going in, especially the Broncos. Thanks.
right. There you go.
Yeah.
But getting back to your question, aside from the Panther situation, when you're seriously already struggling and you've got to figure out a way to fix it before it starts adding to the loss column. I think if you have positions where you have guys competing, maybe you brought in free agents and they're now competing with your starters already there. Maybe you try them out for a quarter, switch them in and out and see who does better against different looks. Maybe you get a couple looks there. If maybe you go talk to the head coach of the team you're playing and you're saying, hey, do we want to bring our starters out for a couple drives? And you guys collectively agree on that. Because I think if you bring your starters out, again, this is a team not in the Panthers situation. If you bring your starters out and the other team doesn't bring their starters out, I think it's a moot point because you're not playing against other starters. You're playing against a second string team. So I think competition is a thing where you do that. Only the positions where you have guys competing for that starting spot and any rookies. I mean, the starting QBs need it. How bad they look, regardless, they need the introduction to the NFL. They need that, and even the wide receivers and the running backs and all the other positions, they need their introductory moment. Better to get them some experience under their belt in preseason and having them come out week 1, get a heavy hit on them by a big veteran player, and be like, man, do I really want to be here? So I think competition and rookies are really the only reasons why you should have starters out there, other than maybe a drive. If you want to just see, maybe I want to see how a first drive works on an offense.
Yeah,
how about you?
We'll get on to Russell Wilson and Sean Payton and all that in the next topic and expand more on that. But specifically looking at some other teams, like I know Geno Smith played a drive or two in the second game. I know Patrick Mahomes has played some in the preseason. So I think like 1 or 2 drives just to make sure they're getting those live reps. I feel like that's okay. Now, if you're putting them in there for like a quarter or two, that's a whole nother conversation. Then I'm a little interested, unless it's like a new offensive coordinator where you're putting in a new offense and you're just trying to make sure, okay, we're getting live reps with new plays. That's one thing. But I also feel like we had a lot of QB movement in the offseason, specifically with Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers. Now, I know Aaron Rodgers sat out for the first 2 preseason games, but I know he's playing this weekend with the Jets. I don't know how long he's playing, probably only like a drive or 2. But I know like Derek Carr played that first preseason game against the Chiefs. So I feel like, especially if it's a new system being put in place or like a new quarterback going somewhere, I feel like that's fine. Just getting those live reps. Again, once we get on to the next topic with Russell Wilson, I feel like he could have needed that last year, or at least as a warning to say, hey, there's probably something here with that. But I think it just really depends on the circumstance, and as long as nobody gets hurt, I feel like it's fine. I agree with you, especially if it's like rookies or people fighting for a position. Give them as much live reps as they can get, just like show themselves, because you can only do so much against people in practice. Only so much contact. Live reps is where you're under the lights, being able to show yourself not only for your team but also for a crowd.
Exactly, and that actually leads in perfectly to how I was going to close this out. Aaron Rodgers starting, is that just to get the fans excited? I mean, he very well might just play a drive, and that just will get Jets Nation excited about it, because they're already doing everything they can to get him screen time. They're on Hard Knocks, Jets fans are so excited he's there, and rightfully so. He's a 2-time MVP winner back to back. I believe he has more than that, but just the fact that he did it 2 years in a row, it's incredible. a lot of respect for him. Hated seeing him. Glad I don't have to anymore 2 times a year. But I think it might just be for the hype for the fans, and that's another reason why some teams might play their starters. And I think that that's usually a bad move. But yeah, let's go into Russell Wilson and Sean Payton.
So
So with that being your prior quarterback, how about you start there? How you feeling with good old Russ over there in Broncos country? Let's ride.
so let's cry for Broncos Nation. Moment of silence for Broncos Nation. Um, with Russell Wilson, I think we're going into a point. One, he's trying to get into the Sean Payton system. Russell Wilson's whole career, going back to college when I watched him at NC State, um, it was a lot of if the play breaks down, Russell Wilson will give himself time, try to make something out of nothing. And that's kind of always been his mantra. A broken down play that, like, especially in the earlier days of the Seahawks with like Doug Baldwin and Tyler Lockett, he's throwing the ball down 20 to 30 yards down the field for completion, and everyone's just sitting there awestruck, not knowing how he just Houdini'd himself out of being sacked by 3 players and just got a touchdown out of a play that should have been probably a 15-yard sack. Now, you always have that other side of it where he can't get out of it in time. But going to the Broncos, I think a part of it was there wasn't a good system put in place year one. And I feel like there's still a lot of work being done to get him back to where he was. A part of it, he's older. He doesn't have the same athleticism as he did with the Seahawks. He's been sacked a lot of times. Probably, I think, for the certain year period, I think Andrew Luck was still higher, but Russell Wilson was right there at 2 and 3. So he was getting banged up a lot. Um, he was usually a pretty good player when it came to not getting injuries, or at least injuries that didn't keep him out for long. The last year of the Seahawks was kind of different with him throwing a pass and his hand hitting Aaron Donald's helmet. That's kind of just a freak accident. That's not really his own body betraying him like happens to some older players. But getting back to the main topic, I think the preseason snaps were Sean Payton's trying to put in a new environment. We saw him go off in that interview saying basically the culture sucked last year. Basically, everyone on the Broncos front office was just incompetent, was basically what he was getting to. So I think there's a lot of things there. He's trying to put in a new system. Starters, you're playing in the preseason. You are getting some snaps at least. And I think trying to rebuild Russell Wilson's confidence, which I think was shaken last year. But I also still I don't think Russell Wilson's washed overall. Now if we get to week 1 and he still sucks, the hand on the panic button's getting a little closer. If we get to midseason, if they are under 500, panic button is being spammed every single second. But I also just think it's a new system. Sean Payton is a lot more into the details. So Russell Wilson can't really break. When the play breaks down, Russell Wilson really can't really do the same things he used to. It's you're throwing passes at this specific moment. You can't wait for something bigger to happen because that's not what the play's developed for. So I think going on to a different issue with the Broncos now, I don't think it's really a Russell Wilson issue. I think the O-line just sucks. We saw in the first game with the Cardinals, which you and me don't really think the Cardinals are going to be good this year. We're after Russell every single play. Like, we say the Panthers' O-line was bad against the Jets. The Broncos' O-line was probably up there for as bad or even worse than the Panthers' O-line, which that's really saying something. So,
Right. I guess my only counter to the O-line portion of that would be the fact that, again, preseason kind of unproven, a lot of testing a lot of things out. But I think that what we saw with the Texans last year Sure, they were a bad team like we all expected in terms of winning record. But for a lot of their games, and maybe I'm just misremembering, but a lot of their games, they were in them for the
Yeah.
majority of them. Like I remember watching the Texans Eagles game, being like, "Wow, let me just watch the Eagles run up a ton of touchdowns on the Texans," and I was like, "This is a close game for about 3 quarters," and then the Eagles, I think, scored 2 touchdowns and took the game. But like the Texans they were gritty because they had nothing to lose by that point in the season. They'd only won like 2 games. So I think the Cardinals are kind of that team this year because they have Kyler Murray, but he's hurt. I don't know when he's coming back. I forget the timeline, but he's hurt right
It's
now. And
mid
they
to
have
late season at best.
right, and they have Buda Baker. Other than that, I don't really know too many guys on the Cardinals roster other than Rondale Moore, Marquise Godwin or Goodwin. So they've got some guys, but other than that, they don't have those standout, they don't have D Hop anymore. He's gone, right? JJ Watt retired.
Yep.
So they don't have these standout guys that you think about when you go play this team. And I think everybody expects them to kind of be bad this year. So they're kind of just like, we have nothing to lose. Get after it. And I think that you see a different kind of aggressiveness with those types of teams. I mean, heck, the Colts beat the Chiefs last year. I
Yeah.
mean, you can see teams that aren't expected to be good or counted out of games go in and just put up a fight and even sometimes take the game. I know the Vikings are notorious for losing at least one game a year that we should not lose because we overlook a team or because we had a very emotional win, and then we come back and just crap the bed. So and the other going back to the main topic, I personally don't think it's the O line. I think it could have been the tenacity of the Cardinals just being like, go after it, be aggressive, go do whatever. And the Broncos kind of being like, let's be cautious, just do the regular things, don't do anything flashy. Because Sean Payton, let's remember, aside from Bounty Gate, I'm gonna put that aside because other than that instance, I truly believe Sean Payton was a great coach. I still think he could be a great coach. Again, he's removed from the coaching positions. He's just coming back, but I think that he is still a great guy. I think he knows how to do it. He obviously had a lot of success as a head coach. So I personally think that he has mastered the art of smoke and mirrors. And I
Yeah.
think that could be the main culprit with the Broncos, uh, what we're seeing in the preseason. I think he might be just telling the starters, get out there, kind of do whatever you want to. I don't want to reveal my offensive playbook, so just kind of play backyard football. If you get sacked, you get sacked. Don't really think too much on it. Just go out there and throw it around. Just do whatever. I mean, granted, he's probably putting more thought into it than that, but I don't think he's saying, here's the play from our playbook, go run this. I don't think or if he is, he's doing the really basic ones that are really easy. And that could be one portion of it. Or again, like you said, we'll find out during the season if Russell Wilson is actually washed. I personally don't think he is, but if he's not playing well during the season, then we know, and the Jets are doing great, then we know it was Russell Wilson and not Nathaniel Hackett. And that would be the common denominator between the two. I mean, that's just taking statistics into it.
My only
So
argument is you're going from Nathaniel Hackett being the head coach to now just being the offensive coordinator. But I also look at it as when looking back at last year and some of the games I saw, especially the Jags Broncos game when they were over in London, what really worked for Russell Wilson. Now, we weren't behind the scenes. We don't know what was really going on with the play calling or anything like that. But when they went back to like the simple plays of, okay, Russell, get me 10 yards here on this pass. Hey, Russell, we're going with this screen pass. We're going with this quick out route. Going back to basic plays honestly worked. But I also look back at the Broncos, some of the more stats you don't really look at. They were the most penalized team in the league when it came to pre-snap penalties, specifically delay of games. They struggled to get the calls in. So once you got to the end of the season, they were scoring points. The offense was actually looking decent. Now they were still losing games, especially when it was against the Chiefs like twice in a row, but they were actually scoring points once Nathaniel Hackett was just out the building. but I also feel we'll see how this season goes. If it was Nathaniel Hackett, or is Russell Wilson just not good enough to carry a team anymore? We'll
Right.
just
And it could be a mixture. I mean, we
yeah,
we we may not know, but I think we have a few ideas, and I think that what I'm hopeful for the Broncos, because I truly like Russell Wilson. I think he's a great player. I think he's a great guy.
yeah,
I'm truly hopeful that Sean Payton is just employing smoke and mirrors, and that when the Broncos come out during the season, they're going to be a great offense because Sean Payton's going to organize it in a way that makes them great during the season. And right now, he's only doing basic things. So hopefully that's the case for them. Um, except for when we play him, I hope he sucks. I hope he craps the bed because we play the Broncos too. So got to think about that before I say all my definitive answers.
yeah. But a part of the reason why I was like only slightly if they have a bad week one start, like getting close to the panic button rather than if week one is a failure, immediately press it. A part of the issue with Sean Payton coming in is you're looking at two different types of offenses. Russell Wilson, as I said earlier, is a lot more okay, we go for the home run ball, or if a play breaks down, either I'm scampering for 20 yards or I'm getting a 30-yard bomb for a touchdown. It's Tyler Lockett or Doug Baldwin or whatever, or now Jerry Jeudy. But then you have Sean Payton where it's a lot of more quick passes, screen passes, basically on time throws where we methodically go down the field where, especially with Pete Carroll's offense, I know he wasn't the main head for the offense, but under him, it was a lot more. We're going for home run shots. I want 30 to 40 yards in 1 to 2 plays. Now, you did have the times, especially before with Marshawn Lynch, where this is a running team with Russell Wilson to come in to either bring us back if we're down or make a miraculous play near the end of the game to make sure we secure this win. Now, you had Super Bowl 51. Don't really like to talk about that. But, or no, 49. My bad. Super Bowl 49, where we kind of saw it going more to Russell Wilson as the head of the offense. Now, part of that was the Seahawks O line just going in a tailspin, and the Seahawks having really bad luck with drafting running backs at that time after Marshawn Lynch left, especially with the injuries. So that's a whole another topic for another day. But I feel like it's just going to take a little bit now. I don't know how long the new Broncos ownership will give Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. I feel like that leash is pretty tight already. I just feel
Right.
like there needs to be some sort of leash just to make sure Russell Wilson has time to get into the new system. Because it's like asking Tom Brady to be a scrambling quarterback, get out of the pocket quarterback when he's a quick pass guy in the pocket. So
Exactly.
that's my only
Yeah, and
point.
again, that may work because you said Russell Wilson's now getting to the point where he's not as mobile as he used to
Yeah,
be, and Sean Payton had all his success basically with Drew Brees,
yeah,
who, as much as I love Drew Brees, amazing quarterback, he was not the mobile quarterback. He was good at scrambling, but but he wasn't gonna run for yards and all that type of stuff. But he was a phenomenal pocket passer. And I think that that's what Russell Wilson has to do now. And I think that that's Sean Payton's one of the perfect guys to coach him to do that, especially when he was finding success and, get 10 yards here, get a slant play here. Sean Payton's the perfect guy to kind
yeah,
of teach Russell Wilson and work with him there. So we could be seeing a combination of things come together and they just work it out.
yeah,
So,
definitely.
but anyway, so this video isn't too long. Let's kind of go down the last couple things we have on the docket. So with your division, one of your division rivals we got on the docket here. How you feeling about the Rams this year? They're getting Cooper Kupp back. They're getting Aaron Donald back. You think they're going to be contenders or pretenders this year?
It's a tough question because a part of the one of the main issues of last year was just injuries devastated the Rams roster, but it's also while some teams are getting younger, getting new guys into the roster, you're not seeing with the Rams anymore when basically all of their first round picks are with other teams. And I don't think they have a first round pick for how many years now, but they're not getting younger, they're just getting older. But it's also, was it just injuries that kept them from being in contention last year? With everybody coming back healthy this year, and if they can stay healthy, if they can get back to that Super Bowl magic, now they've lost players, it's a different roster. That O line just isn't the same where we saw last year with the Bills opener.
Mm.
Matthew Stafford was struggling
They
to get
definitely miss Big
around.
Wit. They definitely miss him.
Um, like a lot of the offensive line was either new, aging, or just not as good as they used to be, or you have the ones retire after the Super Bowl. So unless they can get that offensive line to be together again, I just don't think Matthew Stafford's going to have the time to get to Cooper Kupp. I feel like that defense can still be decent. Now you lost Bobby Wagner, you gave up Jalen Ramsey. There's some holes in that defense now. I feel like Aaron Donald can still be as good as he's been, but there's probably going to be a point where he starts to decline. Could that be this year? I don't know. I'm not going to say that because knowing my luck, he'll come out in week 1 and get 5 sacks on Geno Smith and make me eat it. But it's going to be interesting to see.
Yep, and I mean, I know it's a short answer, but I just have to simply say I agree. I don't think you can simply say they're contenders or pretenders right now. I mean, they have a lot of the guys they had on that Super Bowl roster. However, they did lose a lot of guys, primarily on defense, like you said. But I mean, with Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and Aaron Donald all coming back, those are the 3 most prominent players you think of when you think of the Rams. So I mean, they could have some magic left in them. Maybe they come in as a wild card, or maybe they don't do well this year. Maybe they're average. Don't know. Um, but I think that you summed it up perfectly. That that they come back and they still have the magic, they'll do well. But maybe they're aging out.
Yeah.
Could be that time, and they really set FTP to the max. So they're really not gonna they're really not gonna be able to get back in it after a while. So. But speaking of first round matchups, as you mentioned, Aaron Donald could come in week 1. Next one's Baker Mayfield, and determining whether or not this is his last chance. And he was just announced that he will be the starter going into the season. And of course, his first game is against none other than my Minnesota Vikings. So, personally, I'd just like to lead it off and say that I think that Baker Mayfield could be the next Ryan Fitzpatrick or Case Keenum or one of those type of guys who stays in the NFL, but could be a journeyman backup quarterback, or even just the one who the first quarterback gets injured. Baker Mayfield's the first guy you call. I mean, you saw that with the Rams last year. Everybody counted them out because, oh, it's Baker Mayfield. He's not going to do anything. I think it was against the Raiders, I believe, and he comes in and leads a 96-yard touchdown or 96-yard drive at the end to win the game. And I think that, he's definitely got, the first round talent in him that he obviously was drafted in first pick with first round. But I think that, regardless of how he does this year with the Bucks, I think that he's still going to stay in the league. And I think that it'll just determine what happens with all the other quarterbacks going in. Of course, we have not a lot of young guys coming in here, but I don't think his time in the NFL will be over, if his time with the Bucks does not go well.
I'm going to have to say I disagree on this one. I just feel, especially with a lot of the hype that Baker Mayfield came in and just seeing the decline, I feel like one of his major issues was playing with his hurt shoulder in his last year in Cleveland. And just, I don't know if it was a Cam Newton situation where he just made it worse or whatever happened. And then he went to Carolina, and I just feel like it went downhill. Again, I don't think the Carolina Panthers roster is that talented as maybe Cleveland's was, and I think we saw that. especially when Carolina was just trying to throw any quarterback they had on the roster out to try to get some sort of competence. Um, but especially hearing the rumors in training camp that it's been a lot closer between him and Cal Trask, as many were set to believe coming into training camps, where when he was initially signed, everyone was like, okay, Baker Mayfield's going to be the starter. And now Kyle Trask might actually be a good quarterback, and we'll see what happens, especially if Baker Mayfield isn't able to play well and Kyle Trask gets the job sometime in the regular season. We'll see what happens. But I feel like it's one of those things where we could be seeing Baker Mayfield's not only his last chance, but maybe last snaps in the league this year, depending on if things go horribly.
Interesting. Okay, so basically you're saying this might be his last chance in the league, depending on how things shake out.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this might be his last chance as a definitive starter or as a starter in general. Other than when an injury pops up.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I Ryan Fitzpatrick was definitely overshooting it because he definitely started a lot more games when he was a journeyman QB. So I think Case Keenum would be the better example because he's been a backup in the league for so long and he's bounced around, even took us to an NFC championship game. So I mean, and that was his magic year. Other than that, Case Keenum hasn't really done anything of much note. So so that's where that's where I see Baker ending up. I feel like he's going to be one of those guys who kind of just bounces around on the second string quarterback list. And when a team gets hurt and they don't want to trade for a good quarterback, then they just kind of make a call and go get Baker. That's my again, that was my pick. I mean, I think he's got enough talent to make NFL rosters, and I think that's gonna keep him in the league. So that's why I'd have to disagree with him leaving the NFL if he doesn't do well with the Bucks. But I mean, it could just be the pressure on him. I mean, some guys think they're ready for it and they come in and they aren't. Uh they just break under the pressure. And I mean, maybe he comes into Cleveland and he's expected to win with all the weapons and the defense that they have. They go in, they beat the Steelers, and then I forget who they lost to, but they lost the divisional round.
It was the Chiefs because it was the backup quarterback who came in.
Right, right. So I mean, Baker Mayfield didn't even get his full say. Or no, the Chiefs. You're saying the Chiefs backup quarterback.
Yeah,
That's right.
okay.
Yeah, my bad. But yeah, so he got his playoff win, and then after that, he's kind of he was a turnover machine, I believe, for a little bit.
Well, that was the next year after the playoff push was the shoulder injury, which he tried to play through, and then he got moved to Carolina.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, but again, going to Carolina, I mean, since Cam Newton, Carolina really hasn't been in it.
Oh.
So, I mean, that's another thing where you kind of look at where when you move a quarterback to a different team, how does that work? Because I mean, if you look at it now, you and I have had this conversation a lot before because the 49ers are a very polarizing team where you look at the 49ers QB situation throughout the past years. It's been Jimmy G, and he wins games, even though he's not. I don't think either of us would consider him a top quarterback or even like a top 15, top 20 quarterback. But he's decent. He's not going to turn it over.
Average.
Exactly. He's probably in the 20, somewhere around there. Maybe 25. I don't know. Anyway, but what I'm saying is he's good in the sense of like he's not going to give unnecessary turnovers. He's going to hand the ball off without fumbling it. He's not going to take unnecessary deep shots most of the time.
He's not going to lose you the game, basically.
Exactly. He's not going to lose you the game, but he might not win you the game. But the 49ers have kind of built a roster where anybody can kind of get in there and play QB. They've had backups come in and still put up points and still do well, still shine. I mean, you look at Brock Purdy. I know he's a really good player, so I don't want to bash on Brock Purdy at all with whatever I say, but it's mainly like the fact that he was able to come in, start, and win all the games until he got hurt. was insane. And I'd like to say that was all because Brock Purdy is an amazing quarterback, but you have to look at the 49ers as just such a built team all around, except for the QB position. I mean, they have a top five defense. They have a top five, usually offense, at least in the NFC. Um, so, I mean, when looking at that, if Baker Mayfield goes into a situation like the 49ers or the Eagles, or somebody else like that who has all the pieces around him, just like Case Keenum in 2017. I mean, Case Keenum finally went to a good team in 2017 and he leads into a championship game. I think the same thing could happen for Baker Mayfield. I think he's going to ride the second string team and then eventually somebody's going to need him. But whether it's a good team or not, they're going to sign him and then that's for the year and they'll let him go probably unless they win. But that's personally where I see it because I've seen in my opinion, I've seen this story before. He is Case Keenum 2.0. That's my look on him when I look. I mean, that's what I see. But
I think to
anyway,
go into one final point before we end, kind of the way I see it is it's an unfair comparison, but they've kind of lined up pretty well. And I don't mean to rag on this dude more. I know with what's come out in the past month hasn't been that great, but especially with Cleveland and drafting quarterbacks, the most recent example, well, before Baker Mayfield, but I feel like you look at the storylines and what they came into. Johnny Manziel versus Baker Mayfield. Now, Baker Mayfield actually got them to the playoffs, was actually a good player for at least a season or so. You have Baker Mayfield coming into a situation where the Browns were, what, 0-16 the past year?
mhm.
And no expectations. You had this cocky kid coming out of college who wasn't playing for like national championships, was still playing for a contender, who
Mhm.
came in, won some games, but it just didn't turn out for the best. Got shipped around, and then I just see it as like the same with Johnny Manziel, where he just fades out of the league. Now, it could be because Baker Mayfield, if he doesn't have the same issues that Johnny Manziel does, and I don't believe he does, but like if he doesn't have any ego issues or stuff like that, where we've seen quarterbacks like Cam Newton or whatever, where that ego does become an issue later on, especially if they're sitting on the bench. He could be a journeyman where he's a second, third string quarterback for teams who need it. So you could be right. We'll just have to wait and see.
Right. Yeah, I think that was the same with Case Keenum when he, became a starter in the league. I mean, he went to the Texans and then the Rams, or that could have been flip flop, but he played for both of them for a while. Bounced around the league a little bit, then found Minnesota, then left after it went to Denver, and that didn't work out obviously. But he backed up Josh Allen, and then now he's I think he's back with the Texans or the Rams. He's with one of those teams now. I think it's the Texans. Um, but yeah, I just see so much similarity besides the playoff win. Case Keenum never had a playoff win, but I think the no expectations. I mean, I know as Vikings fans, me and my dad had no expectations for Case Keenum when we signed him after Bradford got hurt in 2017, and
Mhm.
then this dude just proceeds to lead us to an NFC Championship game, and I think that that's a big part for a quarterback when you don't have as much expectations. Uh, you tend to do better. And I think that's with Kirk Cousins on Monday night because if you're not going to mention it, I'll mention it first so it takes the pain off of me. You know, uh, obviously he doesn't do well on Monday nights, and I think that's because it's extra pressure. It's the only game on Monday, so all the people are watching him that night. So I mean, it could just be something like that, and we'll just have to wait and see. With that being said, did that cover all the things on your agenda?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd like to give a big shout out to anybody who've used this first video, especially if you stayed for the whole thing, because this has been a very long video despite our thoughts on it previously. Um, just want to reiterate that we have no prior podcast experience whatsoever, and this could be a very long ride in terms of waiting for our production to get better, both visually and audioly, and also just content wise. we'll have to work on breaking things up a little bit better, kind of giving ourselves time limits, things of that nature. So we just encourage you guys to stick with us. And if you like the content, just let us know. If you think there's ways we can improve, drop something down in the comments and, to let us know what you'd like to hear. We've got preseason 3, week 3 coming up this weekend. That should be interesting. And then we'll have another show on Tuesday to kind of preview the NFL season, week 1. And I think that, we'll have a lot of things to talk about then. So we definitely would like to hear from any of you guys. If there's any of you out there at this point, this could be too early, but definitely if you watch this video, let us know what you think. Let us know what we could do better, what you want to hear. We'll definitely be reading it because we won't have that many, I don't think. So if you post a comment, we will most definitely see it. But with that being said, I just want to mention the fact that with our main goal, besides the fact of creating content and talking about the NFL, which is something we're both passionate about, we want to show that despite the long history between teams such as the Vikings and the Seahawks, obviously we have many playoff matches between each other. We have many, regular season matches that have determined certain playoff positions with our teams. Seahawks obviously winning most of those. And I think that it just shows that given that fact, Matt and I are still good friends. We talk pretty much every week. Now it's going to be about daily. And we don't usually insult each other too much on each other's teams. Usually it's self-deprecating. I'll bring up the Vikings mistakes. He'll bring up the Seahawks mistakes. And that's usually a good thing. So we just want to kind of put that out there for anybody who struggles with that personally with their friends. There's like, oh man, I'm a Cowboys fan and my friend is an Eagles fan or something like that. And you guys just have a bad relationship. It just, just take it out of the equation a little bit, or maybe you can watch it, have some friendly bets or something of that nature. It is possible to get along with somebody who is a rival of your team. Matt, would you like to say any closing remarks?
At the end of the day, it's only a game. No matter how
Exactly.
much money you lose on it, which that's on you.
Sports are meant to be an escape from the real world. So always remember that. It just sucks when the games happen to give you heart attacks, as they so often do with both of our teams. Yeah, 11 one-score games. At least they were all wins.
For now.
Yep, that was last year. We'll see how things turn out this year. But anyway, that will about do it for our podcast this week. Again, let us know what you want to see next week, and we'll have something put out for you, and hopefully we will improve as we go on. So just stay with us for the ride, and hopefully this will turn into something great. We have a lot of plans for the future if things turn out well. So I'm Tyler, that's Matt, and this is VHawks Podcast.